Hi, Reality Riffing. I got to sit down with the great maverick mind of Jaime Leigh, who's a partner at Cooley and has spent her career brokering huge deals, $3 billion deals. She really thrives and teaches leadership, conscious leadership inside these big corporate structures. So we had a really interesting conversation about what it takes to pivot in these digital heavy times, to lead teams, to still have the kind of presence that's necessary in leadership, and also to stay inside the corporate structure and really start to create a new culture from the inside out. I hope you enjoy this riveting conversation with Jaime Leigh. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on, and we're so excited to get to drink of your experience and your knowledge. Can you just kind of introduce your wealth of knowledge and experience so everybody out there gets to know you a little bit?
Yeah. So what I do for a living is negotiate deals. I buy and sell companies, mostly in the tech space and the life sciences space. I've been a lawyer my whole career, so I've been at this for about 20 years. And I'm based in the Bay Area, but I travel quite a lot. At least I used to New
Yeah.
York and LA and Seattle. So we'll be talking a little bit about some of those changes in our time together today. I also have a really strong family connection who I see a lot, both in the Bay Area and in Seattle. I have two stepkids, 8 and 10. And in my spare time, I hang out with you and Rama crew.
Amazing. Let's jump right in. I mean, I think we were talking a couple of days ago just about some of the relevant changes to. I mean, everyone out in the Rama Business School world right now is in different phases of their both personal development, but also kind of what they're doing in terms of entrepreneurialism or working for different companies. And so I'm just curious, like, what you've been seeing in terms of trends with all of these changes.
Um, I would say everything feels really accelerated right now, for
Yeah.
as much as people are physically sitting more still or with smaller physical ranges. Things feel incredibly creative to me, both from sort of a business fundamentals perspective and my clients, but also within my own company. Um, I am the head of M&A at my firm, so I'm in charge of about 90 people. And then the M&A part of the business side of our firm accounts for about a third of the firm's revenue. So that's a meaty piece of a business to try to watch while you're also doing outwardly facing client work too. You
Mm,
know a little bit about that.
yep.
Um, and people feel for sure this sort of anxious, frenetic energy, but they also feel very creative. And I've noticed if you sort of stop for a minute and listen while people are talking, there's also a patience underlying a lot of our business leaders right now. And that's pretty interesting to me to keep an eye on.
And what is MNA?
Oh, it stands for mergers and acquisitions.
Okay.
So M ampersand A, and it basically means I'm gonna buy your shit. So
Yeah. Got it. I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same
yeah.
page. And so, with everything, I mean, being in these Zoom meetings or these whatever platform you're using, all of a sudden with your clients and with the people who are working with you and for you, what have you noticed in terms of trends of the kind of playing ground with all of this digital experiencing in terms of meetings and whether it's a forward facing or internal meeting. I mean, anything that I know we were kind of discussing a little bit of this, but I'm curious to pick your brain.
Yeah, and this is sort of this is getting down to brass tacks. So I love all the things we talk about at Rama, particularly the business school week has been quite compelling.
Yeah.
But there's also this sort of like, did you show up to the meeting with a pen and a piece of paper or not kind of reality
Yep.
about what we're going through, because everything is quite different. And I'll say a couple of things. And some of which are a little harsh, but there are people who show up in this environment in a way that quite literally leaps out of the screen at you. And there's a
Yep.
presence and emotion and an ability to project one's energy quite literally on Zoom or not. And I'm always amazed when people get into a negotiating room together from a business perspective. You can spot the people in 30 seconds or less who never get into a physical location. They only negotiate on the phone, or they just don't necessarily get into a room very often, because there is a different skill set and a different presentation that attaches to someone who can do an in-room negotiation as opposed to someone who's just used to standing in his or her own voice stream screaming into the box on the telephone, right? And this is just a different flavor of it. And people are able to show up in ways that are almost sort of mesmerizing or magnetic in this kind of remote environment. And it's not always the people you would think. And it's not also age or gender specific in any way. It's simply about people who kind of rise to the occasion and figure out how to transmit rather than just receive and process real time. There's a real art to it. And it takes quite a lot of practice. So I would say to folks who are shying away from getting on camera, you got to get yourself over that real fast, because there's going to be a much more powerful ability to connect in a less connected world if you're the one who says, let's get on Zoom. If you're the one who wants to go negotiate something for your business and you make that person show up on screen with you, there's a real power to it. And I think we have sort of hidden ourselves behind the telephone for a number of years here, because we're on our way to the plane, or we're on our way to another meeting, or I'm sitting in a conference room with a bunch of other people and they all want to listen in. But now we have this incredible opportunity to show up, literally show up. And we should all start practicing and getting better at it, because it's a huge differentiator.
I have like little goosebumps because I'm so glad for you to say this, and just also in a very pragmatic way, because I mean, for those of you who are in performance arts, or I'm just trying to think of some different versions of this, but like when you're in theater, you're much bigger than you are when you're in front of the camera, and it's literally completely different skill sets. I think that different sectors in front of the camera. So forget about the performance arts, and now we're in a negotiation room, whether you're in a job interview or you're negotiating some sort of corporate takeover or something like this. There are subtle and not so subtle differences in terms of the skill set that's required to basically project your aura, if I'm using yogic terms, through the virtual space of the camera and all the kind of differentiations thereof. So I think this stuff is super important to talk about. So keep going. Tell us some more stuff.
A couple of observations that I think are fun to play with in this environment. So a lot of times, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, a lot of times let me back up 1 second. When we talk about negotiating, I just want to be super clear that we're negotiating all the time, right? There's everything we do is a negotiation with ourselves, about our time, with our spouses, about very basic household things, with our children, about everything under the sun. So it's always quite interesting to me, and particularly when I'm mentoring younger lawyers or even business people, and they say something complimentary about a thing I did, I always say, oh, I'll teach you how to do that. And we need to remember that we're not putting on a new face or a new hat or new clothes just because we go to have a hard conversation in business. You got to get really comfortable if you want to nail your business having hard conversations. That's it. It's really simple. And most of them are quite short. Most of them happen at inopportune times. Most of them are about hard things, but they don't need to be different either oracally or from a presence perspective than the tools that we use with our everyday life. But you have to bring your everyday self. And I love what you always say about how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
My collegiate coach used to scream, "You race like you practice." And so the first time I think I ever heard you say that, I was like, oh yeah, there's my college coach right there up on the stage in a turban.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can't suddenly show up to do the challenging business negotiation, pitch, presentation, whatever, and think it will go well if you simply put on this new persona. And I see it all the time with people who suddenly become the hard ass or the smartest person in the room, or sometimes it's this meek and mild persona that people put on. And you are your strongest in a negotiation when you are your most authentic. And we say that in lots of different ways with Kundalini yoga. And I see lots of awake people in the business world show up to a negotiation and then just become this otherworldly alien being.
Yeah.
And it's this whole Zoom experience right now is fantastic if you're a watcher, because you can spot it. So I encourage you on your next Zoom meeting to see the different authenticity, because it will actually come out of the screen at you, or it will recess into the screen at you. And it's all there for you, right? You get to look at everybody like Brady Bunch and watch what people are doing to sort of steer and control and engage the conversation. And you can watch what people are doing to repel or lower the frequency of the conversation. So be a watcher and then just try it out. Because the other cool thing about the Zoom environment is that things are lasting, things are taking less time, and things are being conducted in shorter intervals. So it's a total win to play and try and practice market right now with the way that we're conducting business online. So that's just a little backgrounder, but I want to be really clear about the biggest mistake that I see people make in negotiating is to show up and try to be someone that you're not. And I think we get triggered by negotiating and hard conversations, and so we sort of revert to some other thing. It's quite natural for that to happen, but we gotta hold the presence.
Well, I think also in this kind of era that we came from, there's so much modeling of this kind of persona that is the business persona, or the whatever, these kinds of ideas that have been. I think this stuff is definitely collapsing pre-corona, pre-pandemic. A lot of this has been shifting, just because I do give a lot of credit to the millennial generation for forcing the work environment to be, for better, for worse, a little bit more of like a place of authenticity or honesty. I mean, I think that's one of the great gifts that the millennials have given us, but this kind of camera shit doesn't lie is really here right now.
Yeah, and if you can record it and watch yourself do it, it's the most painful minutes of your day, but the most golden nugget experience ever, right? Feedback is a golden nugget, and we all shy away from feedback and we deflect it. We've sort of created a little bit, to your point about the millennial culture, we've actually created a little bit of an environment where we resist giving feedback, I think, because everybody gets a trophy for showing up at soccer practice, and everybody's voices are welcome, and we don't ever really want to crap on our neighbor next door, but our neighbor next door just totally dropped a ball, and like, how do we deal with that? So if feedback is an uncomfortable experience for you, start with yourself. Ask a colleague if the next time you do a meeting, you can record it, simply for watching it yourself and giving yourself a grade, and ask someone else to do the same thing. We've moved, I would say, we have moved and created online content from my firm in this environment in a clip that I would not have expected to even be achievable at this rate. And the very first thing I did when this happened was I got myself on a webinar with a preeminent banker and a preeminent New York Times writer and professor. And I just said, I want to be seen in the outside world with those kinds of people, with that caliber of people. I am going to get myself so good at this online connectivity that I'm going to be the lawyer that can do the online. And that video, when I watched it, was so bad that I cringed almost the entire time.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't forced myself into that very high profile experience, there's zero way that all of the additional content things that we're doing now would be in the sort of quality and authenticity that we have been able to achieve. So you got to go through the burn of watching yourself.
You do, and I think it's important because no matter what happens in the coming months and years, we're not going back. Nothing is going to be the same, and I think there's all sorts of there's going to be some interesting curves and twists to this story, but in terms of then what happens when we are in real life in a room with each other, and how the sensitivity of kind of the relay of our negotiation becomes kind of amplified, I think, in a certain way. But then just the watching yourself and also paying attention to how your impact or what you're saying, or can you get a word in edgewise, or are people listening to you, or all that kind of stuff. How is that, relaying in the digital space? I think, you gotta start now.
And I'll say one more thing that's probably a little bit unpopular, but the female sound current is in a new place. It's my entire career. I've been the only woman in the room, so to speak, whether that was a real room or a virtual room or a telephonic room. We could have an entire day talking about the female sound current, right? And I am so grateful for your Corey Kriya practice the past year, because I think it changed my life. And I mean, I know it changed my life in many ways, but it certainly changed my life in a professional way, because not only was it changing my own sound current, right? You're not just watching yourself on Zoom, you're listening to yourself on Zoom. And it is the perfect avenue with which to do, first person perspective, second position, third position. You win the prize if you can do fourth position on Zoom, but it's an incredible vantage point. And when you're listening to that sound current, it is very important to watch the faces of others, because I think a lot of our listening ears are not yet ready to receive the female sound current, particularly in a business sector. And I hit this 30 times a day in a way that we are accustomed to processing the male sound current. So that's not popular. We all want to think we're way more evolved than that at this point. But I don't care if you're a 65-year-old lawyer or a 22-year-old entrepreneur for, a health and wellness related company. It's the same thing. We're still learning to process female sound current in the connection of business. So what does that mean? If you're on the front lines and you're a woman in business and you're doing your thing, we still have a little bit of work to do. We still have a job to get done in our culture, and that is to help people listen to us talk about money and business decisions in a productive way. And we talk a little bit about don't quit your day job, right? But if you're doing your side hustle and that's where your love of life is, but you're also holding down your day job at a big tech company, maybe what you bring to that is working on your own sound current, so you pave a way for more women to talk in a more authentic way themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it always gives me a lot of perspective when I hear you, because I have been, my whole career, I've worked for myself almost, and it's been with mostly women. So I do have a very different experience, but I think that the experience that you're talking about is so rampant in terms of just what's happening both in the corporate space, but also in the collective consciousness. And So, this goes back to some of the yogic practices of I gave this practice recently to someone in a Korean Women's Leadership Society for her birthday, Melody, I'm talking about, which is, record yourself for 15 minutes talking about how you can be great, because and then listen to it. You have to listen to it as like a meditation. But so any version of recording yourself, but with the video, it's really powerful.
Yeah. 15 minutes is an eternity. Yeah.
It's an eternity. And
nice birthday present.
I know. I mean, the gift that keeps on giving. But no, I do. I really hear you about this kind of penetration of a certain kind of frequency into the business space, into the space of like we were talking yesterday, into investment, into the economics, and and a lot of, I think you can speak to this in terms of just kind of the end of the era of this patriarchy has brought a big swing in terms of how women relate. Like, talk about the business persona. It's like, this is my business persona. I talk a certain way when I'm in my business persona. And I'm some of the toxic masculine kind of shell stuff, and then also the swing where we've seen some of the toxic parts of female leadership be part of that kind of growing pain.
Yeah, it is definitely a cyclical exercise that we're engaged in at the moment. Sort of, at least for me, it feels that way. Like, I sort of round a curve with these issues, and then I go back and I revisit the patriarchy for a couple days, and then, we're moving forward, but it's not linear.
No.
And you have a lot of people in power who are older, and that's just how it's going to be for a while with respect to people's ability to listen or receive. But I would say also very, very clear to me is that the more I am able to do more with my feminine energy, my feminine voice, my feminine way of approaching the situation, the more I am allowing male energy to be more flexible, more pliable, more creative, more interesting, dare I say. Mm-hmm. So it's not just about this energy as opposed to this energy. It's allowing the energies to do this more pliable thing. And there are days, seriously, where I sort of play the foil as a negotiator. I'm like the funny guy in the room, from like a bad 80s sitcom. And it's a really, really effective way to be. 10 years ago, would a woman have been able to play that role in a big business negotiation room? No way, right? So there is this sort of pliancy that I'm starting to see with the different energies in the room. And it is very rewarding and very special to sort of watch, as I'm also seeing, I'm old enough now that there's a whole generation of lawyers behind me who are in the room with me too, and watching the evolution of that stick is quite beautiful. But there's sort of these three sort of chunks of generation in the business world right now, if we're generalizing a little bit. And when you think about the breadth of those chunks in terms of what did it look like when you were coming up through the ranks? You waved to your wife at home, and you got in your Chrysler and you drove to your office. And just so different, right? And we all need to be respectful and mindful of those different chunks of orientation to work, particularly now, as we have no idea what it will look like going forward.
Well, I think, to offer the flip side of this in terms of, it's been something we've been thinking and talking about a lot. It's like we want more men in like our business. We actually want to be working with more men, but I think because of the imbalance and a lot of just kind of, we'll call it the driving force of the millennial feminine kind of wellness industry situation, that it's been actually harder to find men who feel comfortable either working with us or wanting to work with us, because it's that we're so so many women, which is it has its own challenges. So I do think it's, again, this is first, second, third, fourth position. to really be able to see, like I was saying to the girls, I don't know if I told you this, Jamie, but we had that relationship weekend, which you and your amazing husband came to, and I went kind of right before the weekend started. I went to the web page that was of the relationship weekend, and it was like a bunch of like women crying and like hugging each other on the page, because I was like, I wonder why more couples haven't signed up for this. And the moment I went to the sales page, I was like, oh, this is why, because it's like a lot of women like doing a lot of intense like feminine energy type of things, and it wasn't screaming like, and obviously there's all sorts of different relationships, but it certainly wasn't screaming like whatever male identified, whether it's the same sex or some spectrum of that relationship or heteronormative, wasn't screaming that, right? So I think that's another aspect of the other side of this kind of polarity that we're working with on the planet right now.
Yeah, you need a little Justin in London Winters on your page, not just
we
crying
did
women.
we do and we did. I know, I said next time we do this, I know we love having our like female utopia here, but we need another perspective, and I agree with you. I think part of even just this pandemic, I don't know, I've been thinking about this pandemic has brought forth kind of a lot of the disrespect and lack of care that we have for the wisdom holders, no matter how calcified maybe their opinions are, whether we agree with their politics or whether we think they're right or wrong about business or otherwise. I do feel like, kind of this has exposed a lot of the intergenerational kind of mistrust in a certain way, or I don't know exactly how to put it, but I've been seeing a lot of that kind of modern issue that we have with not really like giving credence to people who have a little chronology under their belt.
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit earlier in the day, which is, if you really want to know how you're doing, go ask somebody about what they think of your work or your product or your website or your presence in the organization, who's a very different age than you and probably seems really different.
Yes.
In his or her general life, right? I'm working really hard to try to get my brain to move a little bit ahead of the pack on rethinking mentoring and mentee-mentor relationships through all of this, because it feels to me like a lot of great knowledge comes from people who have simply been through more life cycles at the moment. And I always have a pattern in business when I don't know how to negotiate a point, when I'm at a place that I've either never seen before or feels off, or I don't think I'm bringing the right energy to the room. I always go talk to the meanest, grisliest, most senior partner in the firm and say, could you give me some advice? And that is an incredibly powerful statement on its own. And it kind of doesn't even matter what I hear from that person. I know what I'm trying to solve on my inside. I go to that person. I show how much I revere that person just spending time with me. And it's almost like I don't have to listen, but in the exchange, that person is giving me something, and it's almost like it solves my problem on a non-intellectual level.
Yeah.
And just because somebody isn't able to transmit to you in the words that you might speak more often yourself, that person is still transmitting to you. And it's still the right answer to go ask people who have wisdom whenever you are at one of those junctures. And I'm so glad you raised that, because I'm rethinking the way I mentor others through all of this. And I hope that we all do a really nice job of modeling, even if we're the mentee, modeling to our mentors what we need out of them in this experience and how to move forward.
I mean, I can't, we kind of started the day with this in terms of mentorship, but I think seeking mentors who have different, like you said, who different generations, different opinions, different belief, different lived experience, different. I mean, this stuff, and maybe maybe not just mentors, but also opinions. But I mean, this stuff it is invaluable to. I believe to creating something that will withstand the test of time.
Yeah, I could not be in more alignment with you. And as law firms are weird places, so
Yeah.
so mirroring that from a business perspective is so spot on. I don't, only in academia do people go work in one institution for the rest of their life anymore. And that sort of keeper of the culture and of the stories and of the histories, of the jokes, of the laughs, we should remind ourselves to try to keep those threads, because they're highly, if even if it doesn't pull your heart, it should pull your business brain, because people have been solving problems for hundreds of years from a business perspective, and the sort of obsession with networking has always been very curious to me, and a way to invert some of the exhaustion that comes with feeling like you have to be networking all the time, or that you're putting
Mhm.
something out there into social media never to hear back or see back or understand the data that is digestible from that kind of medium, is to just pick two senior people and say, I need a piece of advice, or could you help me, right? And then listen. The corollary to that is you have to listen. You
Well,
have to actually listen.
and also, I mean, this is like somebody just put, which I love this, mentorship from older white men. Sometimes it's the best advice I can ever get in my career. This is very, I mean, that is, thank you for sharing that. Somebody put that on the chat just now, because, of course, right, old white men are not trending right now, and they're not, there's not a popular hashtag, but I do feel like, and taking the race piece out of it, I do feel like there's a huge, like, Sheba Preet comes from a great line of entrepreneurs, and her father's very self-made, and we're always, kind of, he's really kind of helped her and sculpted her to be a great businesswoman, and we're always kind of picking his brain about stuff. But you need these people. This is an important piece of becoming mature, which I didn't have time to read this part of what I taught this morning, but it was about basically the most successful person has a certain type of depth of maturity, and it's beyond chronology in many ways too.
Totally aligned. Go old people.
And that's why I like TikTok, to bring the whole thing back to TikTok this afternoon. No, but no, there's all these older people going viral on TikTok. It's hilarious. Um, but so, okay, somebody's sitting down for a negotiation. So let's say that they're sitting down for a negotiation, meaning that, like, they are hiring someone, or they are firing someone, or they're trying to get a new job, or any set of kind of, we'll call it negotiations that are going to be coming up or happening right now in this kind of playing field right now. What are some things that you, as an expert negotiator, what are some things that you look for when you're either hiring someone to be on your team, or in the room negotiating with? I mean, can you give us a couple things for people to start to think about in terms of their own negotiations, however that's manifesting?
Yeah. One of the most powerful things that people do when they're advocating for themselves in an interview or a pitch, or when they're advocating for a position in a negotiation, is to honor the power of the pause. Particularly for women, what I notice is this need to keep talking and this need to fill the gap. And to your maturity point, the ability to hold the pause, to stop talking, to just sort of taunt the other side for a response, or let the other person in the room give you some feedback by just and lean in, and then just be ready to receive. And if you gave me a list of 10 practice pointers that I could give for either of the two scenarios that you asked about, the power of the pause would be number 1, number 2, and number 3 on the list. And it is so hard to do with some sort of authenticity, but it is the difference between strong negotiators and weak negotiators. And it is the number one telltale sign to me if a young person is asking for a job or pitching something, and whether or not I actually want to hire that person. Because it shows a level of maturity, ability to listen, an interest in the relay that is occurring between the two people. Even if you're having an unpleasant conversation or you're the underdog in a negotiation, respecting the relay between the two people or between the two adversaries is probably the most effective way to win. And to practice it, I would say, easier in your personal life, easier to your dog, easier in your morning chat with your mom on the phone. Just give it a shot and play with it and figure out how it works, because people sort of light up to me like points of light when we're in a negotiating room or when we're in an interview or a pitch discussion. It's almost like you can feel and then you start to see the point of light. And when someone allows you to respond to them, it's like, hey, I want to be with that person. I want to hang out. There's like a thing going on there. So that's the number one thing I would say. And then the other piece that always stands out to me is respect for the other viewpoints in the room. So you may be same thing to me if you're interviewing for a job or negotiating for a deal point in a contract that you need for your next thing in your business, or you're like me and you're, moving billions of dollars around with companies. Same thing. You have to show up with a respect level for the other people in the room, even if they don't really deserve your respect, but you determine the frequency and the way in which the negotiation or the presentation will go down. And it gets bumpy. I'm not saying it's perfect. It gets real bumpy in there.
Right.
But when you continue to go back, and this is one of the reasons why I like Corey Krea so much, is because it's it's the same thing in a negotiation or a discussion. There is this thing coming back in, you're recycling up, it's going out, it's coming back down, you're recycling it, it's coming up, it's going back out. When I win a really hard negotiation point or entire set of discussions, or when my client feels like we've won, it's because I'm doing this energetically, and I'll try to put it into words, but it's a little bit challenging. It's like the other person puts something out there, I grab it, I internalize it, I maybe just leave it sitting there for a while. We talk about other points, but that thing comes back up. I get to reframe it. I project it out. And this is really hard, and it's taken me many years to figure out how to do it, but I negotiate or present like a wheel that's outside of me, comes back up inside of me, comes back up outside of me, and I reproject exactly how I want the audience or the room to understand what's going on. So you have to show up with a respect for yourself to be able to do that on a dynamic basis. And when you're just presenting your own self in an interview or your pitch deck for your product, it's obviously much easier. It's very challenging in that kind of scenario not to become this insular being. You got to get your energy out. You got to pick up the vibe in the room. You got to consume it. You got to project it back to them. When you're negotiating and you are back and forth on points or things that people want, same thing, just happens way faster. And so I would encourage you to watch for other people doing it really well. You can tell as soon as you're tuned on with the radar to this dynamic, just start watching people. People do it at the grocery store line. It's like the only place we go now, right? You can watch it in the grocery store line, even standing 6 feet back from the checker. You're engaging in this relay. You pick up something the person says, you digest it, you acknowledge it, you project it back out. That person engages with you even 6 feet away with a mask on in a really different way. And the
Yeah.
way to get what you want is to get the engagement. You got to get the engagement.
And I mean, I would also put this for some of the people out there, and this is very relevant. If you're looking to pitch your idea to an investor or pitch it to whoever, and if you're in that phase of starting something, I do recommend pitching it to everyone who will possibly listen, because you're going to get better at your pitch. But the pitch is not just a one-sided thing. I mean, I think it's exactly the same as how you're describing any negotiation, because pitching something to an investor is absolutely or a possible investor is a negotiation.
Everything is a negotiation.
Yeah, everything.
Everything.
Some things. There's also the love songs, and then there's the negotiations. But in my world, I believe that all the love song and the negotiation are one. They're all one thing.
Yeah, the one-sided thing is the worst, right? You know, when you get it, it's just like someone dropped a big, heavy rock on your foot, and then what are you supposed to do with it as the receiver? And unless it's your nephew and you don't want to offend him or her, it's just very difficult. And particularly if you're asking someone for something, money as an investment, partnership, when there's clearly not as much in it for the person you're pitching as will be in it for you. Even employment. I go out, I basically pray for good employees. I literally pray, and I try to manifest them out of my own creative energy.
Yeah.
And when they show up, it's often not because they want a job. It's often because they're on the other side of me. So like, I'm the one doing the pitching, right? And I'm not convincing that person to come work for my team unless that person feels like I love them, right? And so I may be 20 years senior to that person or whatever else from a hierarchical perspective, but I'm finding anything I can to make myself look big and multidimensional and interesting and like a safe place to be. And the one-dimensional pitch is the fastest way to ensure, that candidly, you're also doing damage to yourself because you're recapitulating that same boring, dull way of defining yourself. And so don't do that if you're in that mode of getting the feedback from everybody that you possibly can. Don't you dare take feedback and ignore it. Don't keep doing the same lead balloon thing over and over until you find someone who likes it.
You're not going to find that person. You're not going to find that person.
No, take every piece of feedback. I love feedback. And when somebody says something really icky, I always try to frame it something along the lines of, well, this is not going to be pretty to sit through, but it's going to be gorgeous to put it to use later, right? And that relay creation, you can even have kind of a dumb idea, or you can even be asking for something way out of left field. But if you create that relay, you're going to end up with something.
Yeah, and I do feel like, we don't have very many other examples of this in terms of like in the public, just for public consumption than Shark Tank. But even watching that, even though it's, a lot of it's scripted television, you can learn a lot about this relay in terms of everything being a negotiation, but certainly for like the entrepreneur looking to pitch your something to somebody. I asked everybody, I don't know if you saw this yesterday, Jaime, but to make big asks, and that's there's a power in asking for something in this kind of what you're talking about. I love how you describe kind of the wheel or the relay of it. When you're making an ask, it's not one-sided.
No, you're a great negotiation. You're actually creating a new thing, a new entity, it is like a lie. It's like a mandala in the sand, right? You're actually creating something in which someone is engaging at that moment. And then they walk away and they actually think they have this new thing. They didn't think they had a negotiation. They think they got this thing. And that's super. If you can get there, like, call me. I will hire you for whatever. But it's so awesome when it's working. And it's so bad when it's not. But you know immediately when it's not happening because you stop listening, you start multitasking, you aren't really that into the thing. And again, the Zoom world that we live in is amazing because you can watch it.
I mean, immediately. It's that this is an immediate feedback mechanism that I don't know why, maybe because we're all in a screen. It's like you're getting it more than I think a lot of people, if you're sensitive, it may be different, but a lot of people don't pick up on that non-communicative relay that's happening constantly when you're in the room with someone as much as if you're just, in a screen watching people.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing I would say that this weirdo screen life interlude allows us is to reframe the way we handle our mistakes or things that don't go so well. And one of the pieces I think that we don't talk a lot about in our Kundalini overlapping business life is sort of what do you do when you have a mistake, right? And that's another piece of relay creation that over time, even one of the most amazing negotiations I ever watched between two very senior people. It's sort of like, Olympic level negotiating. And I was a second year lawyer or something, and like barely sitting at the table. And we broke after a big negotiation and we all huddled on our team and the client this and the client that. And it became very clear that we had just made a mistake on our side with the way that we handled a particular issue. And I will never forget it because I was in New York. These conference rooms are big and full of marble and have 20,000 pencils are all very sharp,
Yeah.
And like a TV show stage or something. I remember the first time I ever walked into it, but the very senior lawyer sat down, he looked directly at his counterpart and he said, I just made a mistake and I hope you can respect that I need to back up on this point. And it was like into my body, and when we make errors, the way that we handle them is sometimes an even larger opportunity than if we had done the thing correctly the first time. And that's another opportunity for us right now in this very clunky, often messy, hurried environment, is to practice dealing with how we don't do things super awesome all the time. And I would put that on the list too. And I think we've now made our way to 5 or 6 on my top 10 list, but handling your errors with grace and with respect for yourself in front of others is another thing that always stands out for me. And especially if you are younger, the faster you learn this skill set and the faster it's like you could show off. It's free points for people handling their mistakes. It's just gorgeous to watch in younger people in business.
I thank you for bringing that up because I think there's something, it is profound to watch people, both as a leader. I think it's one of the things that makes a leader, which is that you are the first, or at least close to the first, to admit that you've made a mistake or that you're wrong. I think that's one of the tenets of leadership. And it's not, people think leadership is in some way always being right or always being, something, but really it's being the first person to admit, or the close to first person to admit, the closest you can to the first person to admit that you're wrong and you've made a mistake. It creates a vibration of leadership.
And trust, right? Yep. Owning your shit is the fastest way to create trust with others. And we spend a lot of time, I think, with a personal life focus on that, but it is like glue in the professional sector. And the other piece I would say, just to round out my top 10 list, which probably doesn't even have 10 things on it, is to practice playing. with work, to bring a playfulness and a lightness. I mean, I seriously started a negotiation the other day, like doing this little goofy dance on Zoom because the room was so heavy. And it's your job as a teammate for others when stuff just starts to get, you can just like peel the air out of the room. It's your job to figure out a way to get it to be up here, right? Like, and that's also quite hard when you're the more junior person in the room, or you're standing there solo and you're trying to take yourself very seriously so that other people will too. But having a sense of levity and playfulness, it's like, are you surfing on the wave or standing on the beach looking at the wave or getting pummeled by the wave, right? Yeah. People want to play with others who bring buoyancy into the room. And that probably my biggest weakness. And it is a constant reminder for me to bring that into the room, because it's actually killer from a negotiation perspective if you do it right.
I think it's one of the superpowers of leadership is the ability to play with gravity and levity simultaneously.
Yeah, and to use what we know about polarity live in the room. It's like, money. When you can get it, it's money.
Yeah, there's an alchemy. Okay, I have one funny last question for you, which is, I hear people talking about how they're doing their Zoom meetings without pants on and all this kind of stuff. I don't know, maybe I'm uptight, but I just feel like what is unseen is seen just as much as what is seen. And I mean, what's your opinion about this? Because I'm hearing a lot of people talk about this type of, what you can't see on the Zoom, basically anything goes. And I feel like all of that affects your vibration in a huge way.
Well, I am wearing your sweatpants right now. In case you guys know.
At least you're wearing pants.
High-waisted sweatpants. Only because I love you so much do I wear these horrible things.
Are they uncomfortable? I think they're comfortable.
You love the high waist, and I love you for that.
Yeah, I'm into the high waist. Yeah. But I mean, what do you think?
You gotta put yourself together. You gotta put yourself together, and whatever that means is cool. Preferably with pants, but or a dress, whatever. But you do need to bring yourself to the room, so to speak, whatever that means in this current environment. And honestly, some mornings for me, it's a sweatshirt. You want to talk to me at 6:15 a.m., like, you're getting me in a sweatshirt. But I'm awake and my posture is up there and I'm dialed in on what you're doing. And then I take a shower and I put on a real shirt. And these headphones are terrible for the earring jam. But
I know, I had to take mine off.
But I'm putting myself together every day, and I'm not giving myself, high marks for my sartorial splendor, but I am giving myself the routine and the respect of getting into my work zone. And that feels really good to me, honestly. I feel like a professional when I give myself a little shot of something in the morning other than what I did sadhana in. So people have really different viewpoints about this, and I don't judge when, I just worked with a gazillion dollar CEO the other day, and I think he had just gotten off of his Peloton, and I was like, that's a little gross, but I love it. I love watching people too. It's like voyeurism on display. I love seeing people's dogs and their kids and their books and whatever else. And so it's kind of a nice way to show people a little bit about yourself that they wouldn't get to see in a normal environment. So I say have fun with it.
Yeah, I don't think it's like some, I think we're going to see, because who knows where these trends of working at home are going to go. So I think it's going to be very different. But when we're talking about the kind of yogic technology of putting yourself together, whatever that looks like, you can see it through the screen, is my point.
100%.
You can feel it. You can feel it through the screen. It doesn't have to, it can be in your your tight little cycling shorts, as long as you're feeling like the power of yourself. If you're feeling yourself, I mean, I don't think it's about what you're wearing, but certainly the pantsless business meetings I think are hilarious. It's like a whole trend. It's a whole thing. We so appreciate just rapping with you about some of these things, and just your wealth of experience, and how much you've maneuvered the matrix of the corporate world is profound. So thank you so much for spending some time with us, Jaime.
It's an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank
Just
you.
a blessing.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Reality Riffing. These are conversations that I think are important with people who are doing great things in the world about subject matters that need to be discussed. If you enjoyed the content, the conversation, please feel free to share with your people, share with your friends and family, rate the podcast below, and also subscribe.